So, good morning, everyone. We will now proceed to begin with day two. And before we begin, I will give the floor to Mr. Frank Borges, that he will be opening day two. Then I will explain you a little bit how we'll be working. Thank you.
But don't worry, I will not talk half an hour. I will be brief. I don't want to burn you too much in the morning. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, friends, colleagues, welcome to day two of the conference. We had a good start yesterday. That was at least my impression. And as I said, I welcome you to day two. We will have a lot of interesting sessions, thematics. Daniel will guide you through the thematics in a few minutes. And I guess we will have a lot of interesting communications as well, exchanges, and hopefully a lot of ideas for the future. Thank you very much. No more talking from my side. Daniel, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Frank. So before we are going to proceed, I think that also Amar wanted to say a few words, and then I'll explain. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Daniel, and thanks UNITAR for the invitation and for having us all in this conference. I won't talk too much as well. It's a kind of mentioning the importance of this meeting and this kind of collaboration and multidisciplinary research, which is center for such dynamic risk environment we live in. We actually navigate in uncharted water, and the role of imperative and innovative evidence-based solutions. It became like very important for everybody, for politicians, for business leaders, for researchers and scientific community in general. So having this event is really, really important. I'm very happy just to join and very happy for the networking event yesterday, and very looking forward to hear the presentations today. So as we engage in today's sessions, I think I hope we will take a pleasure in the diverse and get information in the diverse range of research themes and presentations that will take place. And I think we will explore and discover a lot of areas that will help us for future collaborations and develop further our sustainability agenda and safety. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'll give the floor to Dr. John-Hans Kotze.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Ladies and gentlemen in the audience, can I please ask you to challenge some of the discussions today? Because again, on behalf of the organizers, the scientific committee, I would like to, on behalf of UNITAR, the Technological University of Dublin, ETUT+, WADM, and the University, Open University Umberto, to thank you for joining us, because we are all, as we sit around this table, individually, institutionally committed to delivering the Sustainable Development Goals and all those targets. And this is why I would like to kindly invite you to challenge sometimes what is said, because it's by having those, quite heated and constructive discussions that we're going to be able to lock arms and to accelerate the delivery of the targets of the Sustainable Development Goals. So thank you very much once again for being with us today and for being a partner in this collective effort. Thank you.
So thank you very much, John-Hans. So very briefly, let's explain how it's going to be working today, like the most of the different talks and conferences that we will have. It will be divided between 4 tracks, as you can see in the program. You have it printed there, the final version, where you will see the different themes. So very briefly, as John Hans mentioned, please feel free to challenge. This is intended to be as an open forum where every one of us that we are concerned and we are dealing with climate change, security, environmental issues, and sustainability, we are tackling these aspects from different perspectives. Yesterday on the opening session, we were talking as well on the importance of multidisciplinary approaches, and that is what we are going to be doing today, tackling these aspects from different perspectives. So having said that, you will see that you have different themes on geopolitics and geoeconomics of climate security, and we will see how climate security can be dealt in those aspects. But we will have also tracks that they will be dealing with emergency responses and disasters, which are also very important consequences in climate change and security to provide individuals and societies that are being affected by those phenomena. And lately, but not the less, you will have Dr. Lucia Morales and Leah Pope and other colleagues that are present here talking about the role of education and how circular pedagogy and education can bring sustainability to different societies. So having said that, you will have here the different themes. Please feel free to move around and do some exercise because it will be on the 19th floor, the main room. And here you will have different themes. And then you will have on the 27th floor and the 21st floor. So just feel free to connect, interact, and go whatever you feel more suitable that you want to listen and participate, as John Hans was mentioning, on the different discussions. So from there, you will understand that the different themes are divided. You will have also this, it's going to be challenging for the different chairs. You will have as well, and let me say good morning to people that are joining online. Participants will be as well presenting. We have later on different student panels. We have students that are here, but as well, and they will be present online from TU Dublin. So just for the chairs to know, we will help you there. Let me introduce you as well to 2 very important persons as well, Rohit, Mawiza, and then we have Brian that will be also there helping in case that we need for presentations. So having said that, presenters will have 15 minutes to maximum, but the chairs will decide on how to organize the time to present the different works. And then we will open the floor for discussions because this is one of the goals of this conference, that we interact and that we get some ideas going on. So having said that, I think that without any more delay, I want to give floor to the different participants. Let's interact, let's make research synergies flow in order to tackle this. And from there on, at the end, on the closing remarks, we will explain you more also about the different opportunities, like either research opportunities, publication opportunities that we are preparing, but we want this to be an open forum, research forum. So let me welcome you again. And I would just say that hopefully it's going to be a very interesting day. And thank you for being here. And without any more delay, I will give the floor, if I don't miss anyone, to our first chair, the ones that are staying here on theme 1. On geopolitics and geoeconomics of climate security, and the other participants that they will have. Yeah, but that is what I want to say, but thank you, John Hans. Then theme 2, it's going to be climate security, higher education, and future leaders' voices. Theme 3, it's going to be climate change, security, and peace nexus. And theme 4, it's going to be about sustainability mindset of educators and students. So you will find the different floors and the different rooms that those discussions are going to be taking place. And so here I repeat again, here we will begin with theme 1. So we will have 5 minutes break till 9. No, actually, I think we are ahead of time again, so we are good.
Okay.
Yeah, 3 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes to begin. So Please feel free and welcome again to this first research conference. Thank you very much. Since we have a very tight agenda, I would suggest that we stick to the times and coffee break times. Now you made me remind, I should have said that. So we will be guiding you. Thank you.
Excuse me, please, if you're in theme one and you're presenting a paper, can you just quickly dash down for a quick chat? Thank you. Hello again. We're trying to adjust the program a little by allowing the people online to present first and then compress, because we have 3 papers online, presenting online, and 2 people in person here. So we're trying to have the online presentation go first, and then we now compress the in person towards the end and then go into the discussion after that. So please bear with us. We're just trying to key in the other presenters online. So a couple of them are waiting online already, but we'll let you know. Cheers, thanks.
Hello? Do you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you perfectly. So in 2 more minutes, we will begin. Here you will
Okay.
see the chair.
Okay.
Yeah. That's, I think we begin, no?
No, I would type it when
Ah,
we stood up.
okay. So, Ivan, we will begin in.
Yes. Now I lost the sound now. No.
So this is now for check. Can you hear me?
Okay. Now I can hear you. Yeah.
Super. Nobody is speaking at the moment, so. you
Okay,
cannot
it was
hear.
the silence. Okay, great.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll start in the next couple of minutes. Just giving you a heads up.
Can you I'm sharing my screen and well I'm watching on my own screen that you can see it.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay. Okay.
Loud and clear. And then you stop sharing now.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
It
good.
means it's working.
It's working, yes. You never know,
Okay.
technology.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome again to this conference. Delighted to have a relatively full room for this particular panel, particular theme, geopolitics and geoeconomics of climate security. This is what this room is about. So if you're seeking the room where the lottery will be drawn for 1 million euros, I'm sorry to disappoint you, you're probably in the wrong room. That might probably happen tomorrow. So, but welcome very much to this panel and to this session. We've tweaked the program a little just to ensure that the people waiting online are able to get on with the paper and have that queued in. And whilst the two speakers in person here would wrap up, and then we'll move on to the panel discussion afterwards. So if, without much ado, I'd like to introduce the presenter for paper 5. So we're starting with from the very rear, Dr. Nuria Franco and Dr. Ivan Serrano. I think Dr. Serrano will be presenting on behalf of both presenters. So the paper is entitled Green Nationalism, the missing sport between the local and the global discourse. Please, as Dr. Serrano speaks, please jot down your questions, and we'll take questions at the end of the panel, towards the panel discussion. So I'll encourage you, as Jonas has mentioned, for us to have a very engaging discussion towards. If you don't jot down questions, I will be asking all the questions, maybe directed at you, just to be sure that you are listening. Dr. Hiven, if you're ready, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here this morning with you, even though it's remotely. And first of all, thanks also to the organizers and particularly my colleague Danny, who is always a hard worker and making things happen, which is something that we need to give value to, because I know it's very hard to organize this. So without any further ado, I will share the screen again so we can follow this presentation. Let's see if I'm doing it. Okay. So we come up with a fancy title at the beginning, but now I show you the boring reality, what's that lies behind what we are trying to do in this paper. That, as a first disclaimer, I must say this is an ongoing discussion we are having, rather than a finished or completed project. So in this sense, I will be very thankful if any comment, any ideas, or any blank spots can be discussed, or elements that maybe are important and we are not considering this very early presentation. So, as I said, behind this fancy title of green nationalism, the sad reality is that we have a much more complex idea on that we want to approach. No, so hence this sort of title. No, multi-level normative values of climate change discourses. What do we mean by that? First of all, of course, we skip the first slide in justifying why climate change is important. I think we are far beyond this point for at least the last, let's say, 30 to 40 years at least, no? And nowadays we don't need to justify why it's not only an interesting research topic, but especially an urgent issue to be addressed. No? But for us, I have to say, I come from the field of political science, a traditional political science, even though I am part of a group with a strong emphasis on climate change and urban questions. But from a political scientist or a classical political scientist perspective, we need to start with this question: why is climate change difficult to approach from this political science perspective? First of all, and this allows us to connect to classical questions debates in our field. No, first of all, as a policy problem, climate change presents what we, from a theoretical perspective, define as complexity, in the sense, obviously, this is self-explanatory. No, climate change, we find a lot of elements associated in a multifaceted dimension of not only policy agenda, political polarization, international relations, and so on. So in this sense, this is a genuine complex area. And this, as a starting point, also refers to classical works. For instance, one of the founders of the school, let's say, of rational choice, which is, it raises a problem of collective action. Especially and it's a clear-cut case of the difficulty to identify who is generating this a cause around the question of climate change, and how we can associate causes and effects. How can we associate the costs and benefits? Sometimes the costs are concentrated if there is a flood or there is any other climate event we can see on the news, which has very concentrated costs. But at the moment that we want to move to the causes, to the actors involved in that, or to the long-term effects, this becomes much more blurred, let's say, no. So and this relates to this classical approach in political science about identifying costs and benefits, causes and effects. So this somehow is our departing point. The next step we take is, what do we observe? No, what is the elements that raise our awareness on this being not only a social important issue but also an academic one, no? Something that it from the research point of view is generates or raises a number of theoretical questions. And here the approach that we are working lately, not only in this area of climate change, but also related to technology and to political process, and in a more classical way, we start thinking, or we depart from an assessment in saying there are behind or beneath political discourse, we can connect them to certain normative principles. This is behind any political discourse, more whether it's explicit or more implicit, whether these political discourses have an intentional goal or not, but we can associate certain normative principles behind a political discourse, appealing to certain normative moral values to claim legitimacy for such a discourse. This is something very simple point of departure, but it's that step-by-step debate or dialogue that we are entering now. And why is this important? Because what our starting assumption is that discourses on climate change appeal mostly to two different, what we call layers of legitimacy. They appeal to normative, to political values, to moral values associated at what we say that the local, and on the other hand, they appeal to global principles. Of course, we've been hearing about the local, the mixture of the local and the global, the globalization of the world and so on. And our departing point is that most discourses, most legitimatory discourses on climate action are associated to normative values related to local or global level. We all know, local appeals to more immediate daily life of individuals, what we can do on our daily actions we can visualize, which are very close to our personal experience. They have a direct impact on our life, and they mostly needs of face-to-face cooperation. Is the neighborhood, is the school where we take our kids, and so on. So all these interactions are mostly made by face-to-face cooperation. We do things with people we know, we have met. It's in our more close environment. On the other hand, the global appeals to more universal and abstract values. We do things because they are connected to some general abstract principles, of what is good, what we expect from the world, let's say, as a system, the abstract human rights, and so on. So sometimes we often find associated elements such as there is a lack of a direct connection between the individual and the territory or the community where they live. We find associated sort of cosmopolitan values. And also we find this problem that I was mentioning at the beginning, which is difficult to associate, to identify costs and benefits, causes and effects, because they are often dispersed. We cannot connect that how my behavior here in my neighborhood has something to do with a flood on the other side of the world. No, so this is the other stream. So my actions, my attitudes, even my feelings or my perceptions are not directly connected to local principles that I can see in my daily life but to general, to abstract normative principles. In this context is where we find our spot to work on, because obviously climate change is a multifaceted and multi-level challenge. So this is our departing point in this sense. Local actions are important but insufficient. I mean, it's not a matter that I recycle my glass bottles and I will solve climate change. And global actions, we can see that maybe they would be sufficient. They are at least necessary, but difficult to coordinate or to implement at the global level. So between these two extremes, we find this. We can problematize or we can identify or at least raise the hypothesis that climate change being a multifaceted and multi-level challenge, and I will enter a little bit on this in the next slide, but there is a gap between local discourses and global discourses. Then from this observation that are the parting point of discussion, this is important. Why? Because it is necessary to explore all these calls for urgent climate action, which is beyond discussion, that must appeal to all values that may appeal, that may trigger action and specific policies. And they need to appeal to all meaningful layers of legitimacy, or to all meaningful principles that may mobilize individuals, governments, NGOs, and so on at the different level. So between this local and global, we need to explore as well if these discourses on climate change also appeal, or to what extent they also appeal to this, what we call this meso level. No, and if you are familiar with the notion of multi-level governance, it will sound somehow familiar to you. Between the local and the general level, no, we find this sort of meso level between the local and the state or the international arena. And we define this in terms of what theories on communitarian theories, or theories of nationalism, of group and identity theories can bring some theoretical reflections here, and particularly the necessity for non-personal cooperation. This is, I do not behave along general abstract values which apply at the global level and does not and do not relate directly to immediate action, but they neither are related to local principles that foster participation in terms of my daily life. So we identified these two missing spots, and this is why I was referring to this multifaceted challenge, but also it's a multi-level challenge. First, acknowledging that there is a variety of normative principles where calls for climate change action may appeal to, and also that there is a variety of layers of legitimacy. Let's say we have these different levels we are talking about: the local, the meso level, and a general or international level. And this is where our more theoretical discussion begins. First of all, regarding normative principles, one of the missing spots, if we go back to the previous slide, we are talking about normative principles and layers of legitimacy. If we focus on normative principles, we depart from a position in the discussion of political theory that deals with non-ideal theories. We have general principles discussing more high-level philosophy, let's say, but then if we want to apply, we want to see these normative principles having an effect on real political communities, we need to talk about non-ideal theories. Let's say our normative values are expressed, are developed, are implemented in non-ideal, in real world, in non-ideal context. In this sense, and based on previous works, we distinguish between two logics. One is called the principle logic, which is based on moral assessments. And this is, I do things because they are right to do, no? And this follows the Kantian tradition of the categorical imperative. It's something that it's not Friday 9 a.m. is not the best moment to discuss about Kantian distinction between the categorical imperative and the hypothetical imperative, but it is something behind this distinction. And the second one is associated to the consequentialist logic. It's based on causes and effects. So my normative, my political principles are taking into account that if I do A, B will happen, and I need to reflect, and based on this on this Kantian tradition of the hypothetical imperative, that we need to account for the effects of our actions based on our normative values. And this is something that we want to explore, how this distinction and how these normative values are present in real political discourses at different levels. The second missing spot is this gap, no, this blank spot between the local and the global. And this we approach the question of multi-level governance as a scheme of social cooperation. Eventually, any political system or any institution, any collective action institution is a scheme, can be seen as a scheme of social cooperation, which is an institution that allows for individuals to cooperate. And this can be applied at different levels, as we are mentioning, at the local or at a more global level. But in this meso level, it's important because it allows, and it's been widely discussed in the literature, it allows for impersonal cooperation between the local face-to-face and the global abstract principles. There is this spot in between where I can visit, let's say, a store in a city 200 kilometers away and expect a number of things. This is expect a principle of cooperation being applied with someone I do not, I haven't met before, but I recognize as a member of my community, of this scheme of social cooperation. So, and I try to I mean, I think I'm within the schedule. Our next task then from this, let's say, abstract point of departure, because I insist that we come from the field of political theory, we want to address these topics from this perspective. I mean, we do not want to address climate change as a topic as such, but we want to see it from the perspective of political theory. Our next steps in this process of discussion and these early stages of this research are summarized here. No, first, we need to identify which principles are associated with each layer of legitimacy. This is, we are departing, we can see it as an hypothesis or maybe a starting assumption or an axiom, which each layer of legitimacy is associated with certain normative principles. At the local level, it's local participation, cooperation with my neighbor, the responsibility or the duties we have with our more direct environment.
Dr. Evan,
Yes.
Can you please try to wrap up soon?
Yeah, this is the last slide. Yes. And then as a second step, we need to identify a corpus of sources. One important thing I want to mention before I finish is that we can associate certain sources and discourses in order to develop this analysis, but we need not to assume that they are linear. I mean, we will find global discourses at a level of local authorities, for instance, or the other way around. And then we depart from this hypothesis that we will find this gap in this meso level in terms of principles and in terms also of sources. Eventually, and this is where I'm finished, I go back to the slide that I was presenting before. Why is this important? Because we need to appeal, we need to be aware that whether or not the discourses on climate change are appealing to all functional normative values that can bring some sort of action, if not change. And having said that, thank you for your attention. I know this is complex and abstract, but it's not because of you or being this something very sophisticated, but simply because we are at the very, very early stages of this theoretical discussion. So I hope it was not boring, and you find some elements that may bring some ideas or some reflection. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ivan. That was quite thought-provoking. I have a question, but then that will come during the discussion. So if you can please stay online and not leave us, that would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it will be a pleasure.
Great, thanks. For those of you just joining us, we rescheduled the program, the panel a little, so we're trying to take the people online, and then we come back to the in-person, the speakers here. So quickly, and what we've agreed is that we have the discussion afterwards. So if you can kindly note your questions, then we take them after. Same thing for people online. Please note your questions for the presenters, and then we take the discussions after. If you have questions online, we can put them all in the chat box, and then we can take them also. If you would like to join me, I'll introduce the third paper, paper 3, and that's the NATO securitization of the climate change in the Arctic, and this will be presented by Dr. Oscar Signer.
Hello to everyone. Good morning, first of all. It is nice to hear doctor title before my name, but I am PhD student still. I would like to share my screen first of all. Before my presentation, I would like to thank the conference organizers. Today, I will present our paper titled "The NATO Securitization of Climate Change in the Arctic." First of all, I will explain the aim and the research question of the study. The intense impact of the climate change in the Arctic region provide access to Arctic resources. Therefore, with the effect of the climate change, the meaning or the structure in terms of the social constructivist sense, the meaning of the region shifted from the cooperation area to the competition area. This changing structure led to the change in the Arctic's identity, Arctic structure. In this sense, NATO has to prioritize the collective defense dimension of its identity. However, the literature indicates that the collective defense requires the concrete threats, and the climate change remains intangible. Starting from this point, we investigate which discourses strategies that NATO use in order to concretize the climate change. So our study, in this study, we examine NATO's securitization of climate change by asking how and why questions. While presenting this issue, I will follow these steps. First of all, I will explain the social constructivism and the securitization theory, and then I will explain the NATO's identity and the changing structure of Arctic and the effect of this changing structure to the NATO's identity. And as the last one, I will explain the NATO securitization of climate change, the discourses strategies that NATO use. About the social constructivism, the first theory that we use, the first thing that we need to know is the identity. According to constructivism, identities are expressed who or what the actors are. But at the same time, these identities are not fixed or given. Constructivism argues that states can have a variety of identities created through the social interaction with other actors. At the same time, states' identities also form the basis of their interests and behavior. One of the main points that we use is that identity affects behavior. Another issue in the constructivism is the structure-agency relation. According to constructivism, social structure are the combination of the resources, I mean the material elements, in other words, military or economic components, and the rules or norms. We can cover this group as the ideation elements. Constructivism argues that agency and structure mutually construct each other. In other words, change in the structure affects actors' identity and vice versa. This is the first theory that we use in order to understand the effect of the changing Arctic structure to the NATO's identity. Securitization, on the other hand, is the removal of an issue from the normal political agenda and its transformation into the political security area. Securitization theory primarily says that there are three areas where the issues are discussed. In the first area, it is the non-politicized area. In this area, the state is not involved in the problem, and this problem is not the subject of the public debate or discussion. In the political area, the issues become part of public policy. The government allocates the necessary resources to solve the problem. So in politicization means revealing a problem or making it visible in this part. In the securitization area, the problem is included in the field of security. It is presented as existential threat through the speech act, and so urgent or extraordinary decisions become legitimate. According to Copenhagen school, the securitization is not the ideal situation because this leads to anti-democratic consequences, and so issues should be re-included in the field of political area. And now I would like to continue with the explanation of NATO's identity. The dissolution of the Soviet Union raised the question of how NATO will survive in the new era. According to social constructivist perspective, NATO's multi-layered and the flexible identity helped its survival in the new era. The first layer is the fundamental and the inflexible. The first layer involves the protection of the core shared values, such as democracy, free trade, or freedom. The second layer of NATO is the operational identity, based on the three missions. These are the deterrence and defense, crisis prevention and management, and the common security objectives. The third layer of the NATO's identity is the organizational identity, embodied in the Article 2 and the Article 5. While Article 2 aims to promote peaceful relations among the states, Article 5 emphasizes the collective defense dimension. So our study is based on the organizational identity of NATO. While NATO formed the cooperation initiatives in line with the Article 2 in the Arctic, after some problems, some critical situations, NATO preferred to use its collective defense dimension of its identity. I would like to explain the changing structure of Arctic in order to understand the change in the NATO's identity. As I said before, in the beginning of the post-Cold War era, NATO cooperation initiatives spread to the Arctic region too. For example, the signing of the Arctic Environmental Protection Strategy in 1991, or the establishment of the Arctic Council in 1996, or some other steps are taken by NATO and the region actors in order to rise the cooperation in the Arctic. Despite the collaboration efforts, structure of the Arctic has changed through the climate change. Climate change gives opportunity to reach Arctic resources such as oil and the natural gas reserves. It also provides opportunity to open up new sea routes in the Arctic region, for example, northern sea routes, which has greater advantage over the existing route between Asia and Europe. It also, for example, Russia disposed this route as an important global shipping route. All these advantages increase the attention of the actors, including Russia. And from this year, from now on, Russia increased its initiative in the region. For example, Russia ratified the Maritime Doctrine in 2001 in order to apply to the United Nations to expand its exclusive economic zone. Again, in 2007, Russia raised the flag near to North Pole. And we saw a document published by Russia in order to share its national interest in the region and ensure international recognition of Russia's Arctic borders. And in order to protect this national interest in the region, Russia established the Northern Navy Joint Strategic Command in 2014. Overall, we can say that Russia increased all military spending and modernized its operational capabilities in the region. The breaking point was 2014 for the West. After this year, Russia intensified its initiative in the region. Cooperation between Russia and the Arctic states deteriorated and pressure increased for NATO to reconsider its regional policy. As a result, Russia lost its position in the Arctic Security Force Roundtable, and the Arctic Defense Chiefs Conference was suspended. In summary, we can say that the development of civil or the dual threat in the region, I mean the climate change and the geopolitical competition as a result of the climate change, these two threats changed the structure of the region. This structure triggered a change in the NATO's interest, behavior, and overall identity. In this part, there is a theory, there is a thesis written by Daniel in the Harvard University. And Daniel's this thesis says that under the pressure of the increasing geopolitical competition, NATO highlights the collective defense dimension of its identity, especially for Russia. But it is hard to add the climate change to Arctic policy because climate change is not a concrete threat. From this point, we argue that NATO is securitizing climate change in line with its identity in order to concretize the threat. So we make some analysis of the NATO discourses. First of all, about the connection between the climate change and the Article 5, NATO calls climate change as a crisis or the threat multiplier, and NATO officials clearly say that NATO should prioritize the Article 5 for the threats that climate change causes. The main points of NATO's discourse on climate change are related to military security and the political security sectors. In terms of the political security sector, the securitization of climate change focused on the conflict and the violence between states. NATO particularly states that climate change intensifies competition for scarce resources such as water, food, and land, thus leading to conflict and even worse in some regions. It is stated that climate change worsens interconnected security problems in the sensitive region of Middle East, North Africa, and the Sahel, and provides breeding ground for non-state armed groups such as terrorist organizations. About military security, NATO's discourse on the military security focused on the military operations. In this context, NATO emphasized the extreme weather events such as those in Iraq and the Arctic have harmful effect on the alliance bases, military operations, and supply routes. And NATO states that the impact of the rising sea levels, especially in the Arctic region, will have consequences for the naval bases of NATO. About the human security sector, human security is mainly connected with the migration issue. NATO reports suggest that rising sea levels and the temperatures will affect the individuals' lives and force people to migrate. In addition, NATO emphasized that climate change poses a threat to health, water and food security and socioeconomic development, so it increases the risk of climate migration and social instability. The report warns that alliance members could face with political, economical, and humanitarian challenges when this migration flows shift to the European countries. In another sector, economic security sector, this sector is discussed with the connection with the human security. NATO notes that climate crisis causes the economic inequality between states. Some sectors where the majority of population is employed in agriculture, forestry, and fishing will be the most affected by the negative consequences of the climate change. NATO has stated that approximately 30 million people will need humanitarian assistance in Sahel region, where the climate risk overlap with the poor socioeconomic standard conditions. As the last one, about the energy security sector, NATO focuses on the reducing dependence on the fossil fuels and the Russia. NATO argues that leaving this dependency to another country is not a solution, and investing in green energy technologies is vital. NATO states that the gas platform in the Arctic, in the North Sea, is vital for ensuring the supply of energy supply for Europe in general. Overall, to sum up, we have three findings on this study. The first one is that NATO prioritized the security of the Arctic region through the political and the military security sectors, while military security discourses focused on the challenges posed by the climate change which relates to military operations. It emphasized possible conflict and crisis within the scope of the political security. The second finding of the study is the human or economic security discourses. These discourses are not shaped in line with the Arctic. The last finding is that the energy security discourse is related to the dependence on Russia and the fossil fuels, Thanks for listening. Our paper is that.
Thank you very much, Oscar. That was quite thought-provoking also. I've listed about 4 or 10 questions for you. If you can stay online, just joking. And very quickly, we move on to the next paper, which is paper 2. David Gonzalez will be talking about Middle East water and human security, and that builds on nicely with what Oscar has just presented on NATO securitization. So, David, the floor is all yours. Thank you. And yeah, if we can just set a stopwatch at your end also and make sure that we stick with them, that would be greatly appreciated. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here with you, just in order to present you some of the findings and some of the ideas that my colleague Amal Abu-Warda and I myself have been working on for the last years. And it's not just related with Middle East water security, but also with water security in Africa. And this is a new line of research that both of us have established during the last years, just in order to analyze certain links between the security issues in the part of the Middle East, which is also a part in the north of Africa, and also some regions in Africa that are totally related with the problems of their neighbors in the north, and that have some issues that also have many important implications, not only for regional security, but also for the security in a global scale. So we have started this line of research basically focused on human security from a comprehensive approach in the areas of Egypt, Sudan, Eastern Africa, the Horn of Africa, and the Sahel. And we're very pleased to present you some of our ideas for a new line of research that we have started, and it's focused on the project of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam that, as all of you know, is being currently developed in the region, which is placed in the border between Ethiopia and has been the subject of wide controversy for the last decades between 3 countries, which are Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia. Sorry, because I don't have a PPT to present these ideas in a better order, but I'll try to do my best just in order to make some explanations. We've established 2 great questions just in order to proceed with our research. First one is which are the main challenges that this project poses for stability in this region, and which are the challenges in the fields of human security related with water security, with water supply, and also with climate change in this area. And the other one is it possible to find some mechanisms just in order to establish some solution, some type of agreement to this dispute, because we're talking about a dispute that has been deeply rooted within the history of these 3 countries, and that has its origins at the beginning of the 20th century, at the beginning of the colonial era, and that nowadays is posing new threats for security in this whole region. So just in order to make a quick presentation, we also have to take into account that the River Nile basin is composed by 11 riparian states, and this river, the longest river in the world, provides water to more than 300 million people. Now, this river, it's essential in terms of hydric security and energetic security, but also in terms of agriculture, not only in areas, in the riverside areas, but also in the delta region of Egypt. This is the main reason that explains why the Greek traveler Herodotus called Egypt the gift of the Nile. So the Nile is the main the main reason for the existence of Egypt, but it's also very important for Ethiopia and for Sudan. And if we take a closer look at the origins of this problem, we have to take into account that there are two great agreements: the Anglo-Egyptian Agreement of 1929 and the Egyptian Sudanese Agreement in 1959. Both of them established some agreements in order to establish new ways for the sharing of the hydric resources of the Nile, and to lay the ground for the construction of some dams, which is the most important dam in Africa, the Aswan Dam, and the Merowe Dam in Sudan. This has been the origin of the controversies with Ethiopia. At the same time, the regime of the late Emperor Haile Selassie decided to start their own project to build a dam, which is nowadays called the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, and which is presented by Ethiopian government in a sort of nationalistic discourse as its counterpart to the Egyptian Abu Simbel Lake and Aswan Dam. All of this poses many questions for the so-called self-acquired rights on the water of the Nile River basin, and on the possibilities for developing this dam. Egypt has presented its total opposition to the Ethiopian project because because they consider, the Egyptian government consider that this is going to be a project which is going to threat its water supplies and its agriculture, just to make to put it into a nutshell. On the other hand, Ethiopian government says that they have their own rights of the Nile River water, and this is the best solution for their endemic problems, which are mainly related with droughts, famine caused by droughts, and these other problems that are related with providing some type of hydroelectric energy. So their main goal is to establish a hydropower project, not an irrigation project. So they say that they're not going to deprive neither Egypt nor Sudan of the water from the Nile River. But there are also other actors that are involved in this in all of these situations, that are some actors from the international community, because this project is supposed to be one of the grand landmarks of infrastructure in Africa. So Chinese government is also interested, and also other actors that are trying to mediate to find a solution for all of this, to these controversies. This is the case of the United States, the European Union, Russia, and even the United Nations. The United Nations and the African Union have been crucial during the last years, just in order to find some type of mediation to the problems caused by this project. These problems have been provoked in the last years by the decision of the Ethiopian government to unilaterally start the filling up of the dam without any type of agreement with its neighbors. And that had to Ethiopia. There's been 18 rounds of negotiations starting in 2011. The most important was the constitution of international panel of experts in 2013 that tried to find some type of solution from a technical point of view, but that didn't really have any possibility of achieving any kind of agreement. There's also a tripartite national council in 2014 that has not been able to find a solution, and a framework agreement just in order to establish some points for negotiation. But all of this is nowadays nothing else than a tiger paper. And in 2021, the three parties decided to make an appeal to the United Nations Security Council just in order to obtain a declaration for establishing some type of solution. The decision from the United Nations was to try to find a solution from the African Union, taking into practice the idea of try Africa first. And this, the possibility of finding a solution to this controversy is nowadays one of the main challenges for the African Union, just in order to be, as an international organization, capable of developing some institutional framework to find this type of mediated agreements by itself. But nowadays, problem is that they don't really can count on an institutional framework just in order to try to mediate in conflicts like this. And there are another conundrums related with these controversies. The biggest conundrum is related with the current situation of instability in Sudan. But there is another one which is very important, which is related with the geographic situation and the situation in terms of security in all of this region. If we take a look at the map, we can see that this new dam is being constructed next to the Tigray region, which is, as all of you know, has been the scenario for the last war within Ethiopia, and the dam can be considered as a project that could be threatened by some regional groups, more specifically by the Tigray People National Front. And this, all of these problems point out to the necessity of finding some type of compromise between all of the three riparian states. The problems is the problems that for finding some type of compromise are mostly related with the idea of a lack of regulation, just in order to establish some rules or rules of engagement for a mediated solution, because the main conclusion from international law is related with international water law, and this is that there's not a possibility of establishing certain acknowledging of rights on water resources without taking into account each country's perspective. That's what has been established by the so-called Dublin and Helsinki, Berlin and Helsinki rules. So just in order to conclude, in order to wrap up, the main problems that we are facing in this region is that this project is posing some conundrums that have to be resolved right now in order to prevent some further instability. And on the other hand, there's a necessity for developing more integration within this regional within the regional organizations, and which is and any other thing which is very important, to make civil society an important part of all of these relations. Just in order to conclude, we can say that we are facing a situation in this region that is going to have a deep implication for security, not only in Africa, in this part of Africa, but also on a worldwide scale.
Thank you very much, David Gonzalez, for that session. Water is quite important, like we all know. It's one of the things, resource that we understood in recent years to be essential, and is an essential resource that it can also become a hazard. If the flow is too high, it becomes an hazard that is flood. And if the flow is too low, then it also becomes an hazard that is a drought. And you can understand the dilemma there, especially in regions around the world where water is scarce. And when you have the direct impact of climate change, it even becomes more challenging to address the issue. But more importantly, the reason to bring all parties to the table, because again, it's an essential resource. I'll just go on then. We go back to the top for the beginning. The first paper, Internal Displacement, Economic Development, and Security Nexus. And this paper ties the theme of this panel nicely in terms of the relationship between geopolitics and geoeconomics. And this paper will be presented by Dr. Feter Baku, who's been very patiently waiting beside me, seated beside me. Over to you.
I will just need the mouse. Yeah, I think more than this. So we don't need this. Yeah, this mouse is. Yeah, if the cable is not, well, maybe you can have me switch the next slide. No, it's not that one. The cable is a bit shorter than I expected. So okay,
Just let me know when.
Keep it as a PowerPoint, because I'm thinking it's going to be short for us. We need to pass. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me today here. I would like to start with a short notice from a Turkish writer who's not very popular at the moment in Turkey. But she's saying that once you are abroad, you're first foreign to your name. My proper pronunciation of name is Fethiye Burcu, Türkmen Ceylan. Nice to meet you again. So this is an ongoing work, first of all, with my colleagues from University of East Anglia and my Turkish university from Kırşehir Ahemran University. So, and it's already based on PhD thesis of last two names, Bengü and Emrah, my two colleagues. And Alessandro is also overseeing the research because he's an expert on this kind of, GHG related, climate change related topics. And we are doing this work since August, and we have already come up with some important results, which we'd like to share with you. And can we go back to slide?
Yeah, it just keeps timing out. Okay.
Yeah, anyway, I can start with the plan of the presentation, which is going to be swift and it's not going to be time consuming a lot. So the plan of the presentation, I'm going to present you the background of the research. So the questions why we did selected this topic to study. So these are going to be my slides on 2 and 3. And then we will go with slides number 4, 5, 6, and 7. I am an economist, and actually I'm doing econometrics and statistics, so I could put them in numerical way, but I prefer to express them in a verbal way because this is better, because I know that this audience is more multidisciplinary than I come across with in other occasions. And in number 8, 9, 10, and 11, I'm going to talk about the results. So I think the real story start for me as an economist. The real story starts with number 8, 9, 10, and 11. And you can be more interested in earlier slides. So please just feel free to ask questions if you have questions. But I may not be the right person in this group of people to answer your questions immediately. So this is just the usual disclaimer that I'm doing the numerical part of the things. And last slide is going to talk about possible research outcomes, and we are waiting your active contribution at this point. If you have other, ideas that can help us to improve our work, it would be very much appreciated. Thanks a lot. So we selected a few countries on the basis of a global climate risk index report published in 2021. So Myanmar and Bangladesh, these two countries are very important because they're always ranked among the top 10 in terms of risk of climate change. So we didn't select these countries because we are living there or we have direct experience, but we look at the statistics, and the statistics in different rankings and different lists, Myanmar and Bangladesh. And then at the end of the slides, I'm going to share with you Zimbabwe and Mozambique. These are coming up, the most climate fragile, climate risky countries. So we started with, and it is not just because of random effects. It's no surprise that these two countries are neighboring geographically. So it's actually important to understand the geographical dynamics in terms of these South Asian countries. So this is how we started. Let me go back. Next slide. This one. It works. I don't know, it may not work, so don't make things complicated. So now the seminal study, Raya Muttarak is our friend from University of East Anglia, and she's got a very important seminal work in the field. And the paper already, if my memory serves me right, they got citations more than 500. So it's a very recent paper, actually not that old, but it's got already a huge amount of citations. So the study, the importance of the study was that it was conducted as a panel data, and with all, it means globally. They got sample set of countries more than ours. But because you are doing something more aggregated, actually your results, yes, they can be generalized, but it is far from being specific. And another thing is that this study actually followed the link, the climate change, economic activity, security, and forced migration. So step-by-step work. But with one of our studies still ongoing, but it's about to be published soon, with Alessandro, we noticed that temperature is not that exogenous. It can be endogenous. So you have the agricultural activity, this can affect the dietary choices, and this can affect the temperature. So temperature, the model that they use, actually they accept the temperature as an exogenous, which means that it is given. It is just, we don't know how it is explained, but it is given in the model. So this is how they tackle the climate change. But we thought that economic activity and climate change, they're taking at the same time, and there can be interlinkages between them. So a reciprocal relationship. So we try to address this issue by taking them endogenous. And then we said that they focused on migration internationally, but we think that international migration is eventually a possible result of internal displacement, because once you are not happy in your country, internally displaced, you can end up with going with the new destination, trying to find new destinations. So we try to understand if this kind of structure can help to understand, the internal displacement, because a conflict that can be affected by climate change and economic activity can lead to international migration, but we are not focusing on the last point now, currently. And of course, we got the short and long run impacts that we need to discuss. Okay, we can go that part. So slides 4, 5, and 6, and 7, as I told before, they are talking about the independent variables. So in terms of an econometric model, we get something that we need to explain. But once we need to explain that one, we need to find other factors that is going to affect this factor. So what we are doing is actually here is that we are looking for geography, and then agriculture, and then development challenge. So in order to address geography, we already got these two countries. We focused on particularly these two countries in the same panel. So this means that we get 2 cross sections and 1 time series. And agriculture is the share of the agriculture. So these two countries are very well known with the importance of agricultural activity when they are producing their GDP. So that's why we took as an independent variable. And then we also take into account development challenge, which means in our case is represented by GDP. I can feel that you might have some criticism on that, but GDP actually is the most common indicator of economic development in a way, actually. And I want to explain that point as well, because in previous slides I talk about long and short run. We don't look at long run because we don't have enough data to go back prior to 2009. So these models are based on the short-term effects. So actually, this is telling you that once you have scarce data with developing regions of the world, how can you manage this? Because Mutarak's work was a little bit more long run, but ours is short run. If we can really capture the short-term impacts of climate change on security, and results are surprisingly consistent with our expectations. So I'm very impatient to share the results actually after these, Okay, this is where the data comes from. And yes, there we go. These are the results. So this error correction parameter, ECM, is actually after a shock, how long it takes to go back to previous equilibrium. So if you're an economist, you already know what the equilibrium means. But in our case, equilibrium, let's say, how long does it take to stabilize? So you can think of that. And given that we are working with yearly data, anything less than 1 is actually telling you that you are going to get stabilized less than a year. And then afterwards, if it is positive, this means that you are never able to go back to your previous equilibrium. It is an explosive process. This means that it's going to remain a permanent impact on your previous, so you're moving forward to a new equilibrium. So in case of Bangladesh, we found that, yes, it is statistically very significant, although the impact once the temperature is endogenous, which we built our hypothesis on that one. And we can see that actually if temperature is affecting agriculture and agricultural activity affect the temperature. So you can see that it has a permanent impact on the independent, internally displaced people on conflict. And then GDP has exactly what we affected. This is very interesting. For Myanmar, we noticed that it should be, because if your GDP is increasing, you would expect less internally displaced people. But for Bangladesh, this is obviously, it is positive. This means that some parts of the world is actually, some part of the country is changing faster than others. So people are moving to more developed regions in order to increase the economic activity. This is a sign of that. And this is not surprising because we know that Bangladesh economy is actually far beyond the Myanmar. Although both countries are still developing, the GDP is actually 3 times higher compared in Bangladesh. It's 3 times higher than the Myanmar. And temperature, as we expected, positive even in the short run. If temperature is, if you look at it in the short run, if you count is as an endogenous, this was something that we built our hypothesis again. And you can see that the impact is even in the short run because our models, because we have 13 years back data, so we had to set up an ARDL model just with 1 year lag, which means that just you're taking into account last year's effect to understand on this year's activity. So we can see that it is even in the short run positive effect. And as we expected, political instability has, the impact in the short run. So this is something. And again, what Mutarak did in temperature exogenous and temperature exogenous. In these models, we had to take into account constant and trend because it's obvious that once we take temperature endogenous, it can capture some trend effects. But once we treat it as exogenous, we need to think about some trend effects as well. So this is also, we can discuss this later, so I'm not going to bother you a lot because I run out of time. Running out of time. Okay, anyway, I'm going to wrap up very quickly. Results are consistent with our expectations. And just let me get. Oh, yes, this is actually, once you have 13 years data, you may not be able to run unit root tests, which means that if these long run results are going to be meaningful. So our VAR results are saying that this data is in a way co-integrated because there's no explosive process here. So our model in the short run and long run will be consistent theoretically. And these are the two diagrams that I'm not going to bother you a lot, but this is telling us that the dynamics is going to be very similar in temperature, exogenous and endogenous. Now, the last slide is, yes, we know that sample is too small, and it is not because of our independent variables, but dependent variable itself, because we don't have enough data on in country displaced people. We don't know. It is not available prior to 2009. Yes, comparison matters. There are regional dynamics that are affecting two countries. It's not surprising. And could we capture the same thing for Zimbabwe and Mozambique, because those are two neighboring countries? We use internal displacement with violence, but we can diversify our analysis by taking into account extreme weather. So there is a data on that. So we are going to replicate this exercise with this independent variable. And then maybe we can find another climate change data that can affect, a sort of index. We are still looking for that one back early to 1970s. And this study can be extended a little bit earlier, and we can capture the change after 2000 onwards. So many thanks for listening to me.
Thank you very much for that paper. It's good to see the significance between the GDP and all the calculations showing that the impact of agricultural activity on climate change and the economic and vice versa. That's encouraging. Perhaps the similar model can be replicated to all the regions to see how that will work. But yeah, we get into the discussion.
Just a very quick notice. Actually, your starting point matters a lot. Once we can see these results with Myanmar and Bangladesh, we can see that Bangladesh compared to Myanmar is a more developed country, and they are more resilient. And we can easily capture this from the estimation results. So this means that actually, if I was a referee for this paper, I would just say that the main contribution is that understanding your starting point matters. Your development level is going to definitely affect how you're handling the security and climate change nexus. Thanks a lot.
Thank you once again, and that's good to know. So we just go to the last paper for this panel. I know we're running out of time, but we still eke out time for discussion after this. So quickly, if you allow me, welcome Dr. Daniel Radmill to speak on geopolitical risk and war, an overview of it. So because it's an overview, it truly would be an overview. He has about 60 seconds to do that. I'm just joking. It would take his time.
No worries. Thank you very much. I will try to go fast because actually I was tempted either to present or discuss your paper, but I'm going to go on that. But it goes hand by hand. So I'm going to be fast because actually what I will try to present today, it's an ongoing work and a project. So you're invited to join as well on this research track, and that we are doing with Lucia Morales as well. And we have this line that we are trying to measure the combination between geopolitical risk, climate change, security, and the geoeconomics and geopolitical consequences. So it goes hand by hand with what you just presented. And I know we have here like Bruno and other Michele that we were discussing about how to do indexes and how to measure. So that's why I say it's perfectly, because we are more than open to new ideas and how to measure that in an appropriate way. So basically, and going fast, if not, I will pass you the paper. We published recently one work and we are continuing developing. We have this question because we want not just to be narrowed down on economics. Myself is background economics and politics. We want to measure something that people, sorry. Oh. Thank you. Well, but can you listen? Can you see it? Ah, okay, okay. Yeah, no, yeah. Thank you thank you very much. So, so basically, we want to be able to measure that to offer people, like how we measure this. So basically, that's why we were interested on geopolitical risk, because it's a combination about geoeconomics and geopolitics, and we want to measure the impact. So a lot of questions, dilemmas that you raised, we have it as well. So basically understanding that geopolitical risk should be the transference of risk on geography, climate change. We want to integrate that to see how it affects as well economic sphere. That's why we are trying to measure, for example, as well, like deterrence threats, how it could be affected, because we have a lot of issues also with nuclear deterrence. And we are also seeing that also has a transfer to economic market and financial markets. So we are trying to integrate that all together. So basically, I'm skipping the slides that are more like in general, but I will very briefly overview. We use as a basic Caldara and Jacobello index that basically, I don't know if you're familiar, but basically it calculates and integrates the frequency that, for example, in articles as a measure of public opinion and policy concern about what is considered about threats or war threats or upcoming threats, and how these are integrated as well on climate threats. And this is like as researchers, it's something that we are trying to incorporate. Everyone is talking about climate change and risk and security, but which measure should we take? So this is an open debate and ongoing, as you were talking about displacement, internal displacement. So this is an open discussion that we've got. So basically, when we build the geopolitical risk based on this measure, as a basic, we can find this appearance of articles which measure that there are some adverse geopolitical events. And that, again, is the question. What is an adverse geopolitical event? So here, okay. Okay, yeah, well, not working, so we will try in that way. So here what we have is war threats, peace threats, military build-ups, like then we have nuclear threats, terror threats, beginning of war, escalation of war, and terror attacks. So basically, it's again, it's an ongoing reflection. So how are we going to capture all these shocks that there are on the geopolitical base, how they are going to be transferred to the economic sphere? So that's why I said you're very welcome, because it's the ongoing discussion, and we are seeing some correlation that here I'm just I'm presenting very briefly. But for example, what about nuclear threats? It's okay. One moment. I'm going fast, not that much. So basically, also we have like other threats that could be incorporated. So what we are currently doing, it's seeing how it's going to be affecting the financial markets. And here we have to also the ongoing discussion on how to assimilate threats from climate, because we are seeing a lot of integration and, as you say, new variables that we want to build. That's the question, how? And yeah, and that's why we want to open the discussion. So we are also, as you were mentioning, we are very aware of our limitations as well when building the econometric models and how to integrate the different variables, because the geopolitical risk index, that it's the famous one by Jacobello, it's okay, it's a good measure, but how you integrate other variables that are not present in newspapers, no? How to measure climate change. Yesterday, I was having the discussion with Mikel as well, and this is an ongoing thing, no? How to build these reliable metrics that you could be using afterwards. So, yeah, no, yeah. So here, for example, we did that with the war in Ukraine, and you can see, I don't know how big you can see it, otherwise I will send it to you. We could see this, we integrated the geopolitical risk index with the economic policy uncertainty, which is also very used index by economists to integrate uncertainty, how it's transferred to the economic field. So the nice thing to see is when you co-integrate and interrelate both of them, the geopolitical risk index, that it's based on geopolitical adverse threats, with a purely more economic uncertainty index, then indeed there is a correlation that you could see. And after we could discuss more like the econometrics and overlaps and shocks. But it's interesting that you have more or less the same correlation, even though like recently times, it's not 100%. So if you're seeing this, and we used to do that for the Ukrainian Russian like war in Ukraine, basically. So you could see the evolution as well, that there is a relation we integrated as well with a very important issue that we are discussing this, that is the use of natural resources and how you integrate them as a geopolitical tool or geoeconomic tool in these ongoing like wars that we have. So that's why we did, we saw obviously that there is a correlation in this case with Russia, because it's one of the main providers. And that's what was interesting to see. And we had also more data here. I'm presenting just, an appetizer that you get, then want to know more. So we see this evolution. Actually now with what is going on as well, we have other conflicts that we are trying to integrate. So here the question is, the role of natural resources, how to integrate climate change threats as well. Also, like when we have like the geopolitical risk, Donald, we have also a lot of things on how emergencies develop and how it's incorporated in these threats and how aid is released as well on this. So this is an ongoing work that we are doing and we are trying to assimilate. So basically, to build this index is our goal, is our chance, but we don't want to be stick on a purely econometric models that like people are not perhaps able to get on the first, and we want to make it easy and access that everyone can consult and could be accessible for everyone.
You can use principal components.
Yeah, we are on that. Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm just concluding remarks, and then of course it's open to debate. And then the concluding remarks, I went fast, Chair, with that. I think I get on time for everyone to debate. So basically, concluding remarks, very basic of this ongoing work, is there is a need of multidisciplinary studies. That's why it's very exciting to have here in the audience different disciplines. Why? Because we often, in a narrow-minded way of just purely economics or just purely political science. And I think we need to contribute more because as we are seeing today, there's a lot of effects on climate change security. The challenge is how to integrate that we can all work together in offering a complete index to measure this. Difficulty to integrate variables, you were talking about this. If we're going back to the purely mathematical or statistical way, how we build this index and that it could be a reliable index, that is our question. We are using the geopolitical risk index, the economic uncertainty, but we are trying to merge as well with the natural energy resources and climate change and risk and emergency risk, how to build that. And then the ongoing question, that I ask myself and everyone, what is geopolitical risk and what should not be considered as a geopolitical risk? Because at the end of the day, it's the same as sustainability, what we were discussing yesterday, how to measure and how to define that,
This can be an opportunity as well.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But if you remember, 8 seconds left. Sustainability, when we studied in economics, it was purely like to make sustainable a company. Now we change and evolve. So to be continued, and I leave it there on 10 minutes, go back to you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I wasn't quite sure whether we've jumped into the discussion or whether we were still having the paper presentation. So, but thank you for leading us into the discussion about the papers. I think I know we started late and we've kind of running a bit late also. So this is what we're going to do to help us maximize time. We would have a discussion for about 10 minutes, and then we have a quick wrap up by 3 people, just a concluding remark, and then we break out. I understand that we're meant to go into a coffee break. I don't want to be the person standing in the way of your break. Break and eating is fundamental human rights. And let's be said that we are not the one that will violate your human rights for having tea break. So on that very friendly note, I'd like to open the floor for discussion. So we've had 3 papers, thought-provoking. We've talked about things that lead into human security and what have you. So questions, anyone from the floor? I've checked online. There are no questions in the chat that I'll read out, but yes, please. Okay, so yeah. Can you please just mention your name and affiliation pretty quickly, and then your
Yes,
question to
of course. Thanks a lot for a series of very varied and thought-provoking presentations. My name is Tor Olav Iversen. So I'm Senior Research Fellow at the Norwegian Institute of International Affairs. It was really interesting to hear briefly at the end about like your efforts of like building this new index to measure this like very like complex concept of geopolitical risk. So it would be also really interesting to hear like how do you approach weight, since this is like a composite index, obviously, including a lot of like sub indicators and subtopics. How do you approach weighting different topics? So how much should like towards this concept of geopolitical risks? Should, for instance, economic turbulence weigh? How much should violent conflict weigh? So it would be interesting to hear some reflections on that note. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I'll let you. Any other question relating to the last paper, the last two papers? No, so I'll let you just go then. Anybody? No. So the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for the reflection that it's the ongoing, because if we build the geopolitical risk, we have issues as well with, we divide it between, and it's divided that way, the one that we are using, between historical geopolitical risk, and then the question is, as you mentioned, no, how the variables that you incorporate on building this historical have evolved to nowadays reality. So to answer your question, the reflection is still ongoing because we are very critical about this geopolitical risk as well. We are using it because of what it has been built, but it doesn't mean it's not less critical. And that's the challenge, to listen to you after and also your presentation and to learn how to evolve. So how we weigh that, that is the question. For example, like nuclear threats are one part of those threats relating to geopolitical risk, but as then you have like terrorism, you have war. But the question is, what you consider as an imminent threat, no? It's like the same with deterrence, no? Like what is immediate deterrence versus like general deterrence, and how you incorporate what is going to be a reliable, not reliable, sorry, a firm threat that it could be incorporated. So this is the ongoing discussion. So I'm more than willing to hear your thoughts, if not afterwards. But of course, what you said is right, no? How you really weight what should be incorporated and in which. And this is the problem also in the challenge with composite index that we are trying to build. And actually then you have the other challenge that you mentioned about economics, no? Like which indexes and what are you measuring, no? Like volatility, and then probably my colleague that she knows a lot as well, and how to measure like these shocks and volatile that are in the stock markets and how to measure them. And this is where the challenge, because the index is built basically on newspapers, as you mentioned, as you saw, and the frequency. But this, again, it makes also a problem when you correlate it to purely econometric indexes. So the flow is open and the reflection is valid. But I'm happy to discuss it with you. Yeah.
Any more question from the floor? Yes, please.
I Michele Lazzarini from European Satellite Center. It's very nice because, I mean, we come from all different sectors, but we are facing the same problem about which type of data information we would like to obtain. I would like to know your opinion about about the data available, because I have a feeling that the data are there, so we have enough data. And it's more about the way we have to treat the data to make them to extract information. So do you think that the data to extract this, let's say, climate security index are there, or there is something missing in terms of data that you would like to have to calculate it? Thanks.
Okay, many thanks for your question. Now I'm working on 3 points or 3 ongoing papers actually currently I'm working on. One is GHG and dietary chains and the climate risk, and the other one food security. Another one is financial inclusion and climate change. And now I'm working on it. So all of them. my experience so far, even being someone, being very busy with this kind of data as an economist, but I'm an economist, so this is a usual disclaimer, warning. I may be very narrow-minded because if I have to measure, so this is the most important thing. And once you are measuring, if this room was full of economists, the first question that they would ask, did you take into account endogeneity? Yeah. So you are saying that, yes, there's enough data, but we don't know the real dynamics. So actually, it could end up with something like that. In order to measure welfare, you can end up with using both your richness and your income. This is called multicollinearity in our profession. So this is one. So you may use two similar things at the same time, which can affect measuring or capturing the correct impact. This is one way. So, so far, my understanding is that climate change is actually both the result and the cause. So, and the reason that why we have that much data is actually not, is a threat, is a risk, not that, the point. So we should really come up with, other theoretical, discussions that they are going to lead us. I don't think we economists can do much at this point. We really need help from other, fields of research. So they're going to come up with ideas, and then we will say that, okay, this can be a reason to consider when building up or when designing our models. But otherwise, I can say that it is very endogenous. It is both results. So in this case, you may not be able to understand the cause and the impact. So I don't know. This is something that I'm still thinking about, and that's why I'm saying that. This is maybe very critical to say that, a little bit vague expression, but all the studies on climate change actually can be a result of publication bias and can actually lead us to somewhere that we don't want to be actually. So I don't know which one is, because once you change the hypothesis, or let's say the underlying assumptions, you can see that results remarkably change. So this is something, making me think about, or I don't want to say dubious or suspicious, but I'm a little bit hesitant to accept them as the correct way of addressing it. Thanks.
To build on that, because there's a question online for you, and this relates to temperature. So
we are planning to use precipitation as well.
Yes, it's just wondering if there's if you have like a threshold or an interaction in terms of the continuous strength measurement of it.
Because this is something technical. Because we presented short-run models, we use first differences because it's lag one model. So we look at the differences, but you can use, you can get the mean or median statistical, and you can calculate the standard deviations. Anyway, you can take this as an index. So we didn't use any specific index because sometimes you treat the data in order to tell you what you're expecting to see. So we didn't want to do this. We use the data, so it's mostly harmless econometrics. Let's say so. Okay.
Thank you. Any other question from the floor? Okay.
Okay, can you hear? Yeah. My name is Murat Gülmez from Turkey, Associate Professor of Marketing at China University. And my question will be directed to either professors here presented. As the geopolitical location of Turkey, for example, since my childhood, we have been taught that it's an advantage. But I don't see that as an advantage since I have grown up. Like we are in the middle of crisis all the time. Like since my childhood, there's the Gulf War, the Iran-Iraq war, then the Syrian war, and now Israel conflict. It's all on our door. And the Armenian-Azerbaijan matter is also there. So geopolitically, we were taught that we were the bridge between Asia and Europe. It's a very good location because it brings you a lot of advantages economically and so on, but it didn't end up like that. So how do you calculate when you calculate those things, the variables that you take? Is it the advantage or is it a disadvantage? Sometimes the things that you see as an advantage comes up as a disadvantage. So how do you make the distinction between those?
So I would prefer to say not disadvantages or advantages, but possible outcomes, let's say so. For example, we previously discussed the Russian way of global warming and new sea routes, so trade routes. So this is an opportunity, risk for the rest of the world, the global warming, but opportunity for the rest. So it depends on your point of view, but I can assure you that I am working with Turkish data from weather, I don't know what to say, meteorology in French. So we are working with them, and the data is telling me that actually Turkey's geographical location, given that actually we are not that humid actually as well, so we are able to discuss countries, 2 or 3% of the whole land is actually water. And given that the new climate change is going to affect the middle belt of the Turkish Anatolian Peninsula, and this is going to be definitely a threat. But if we can adapt, if we are resilient, if we develop, in one of the presenters, they just talk about this public resources, so and public choice, other theories, and if we have enough intervention, this can turn into an advantage. We may never know. We can just forecast. We can say that these are possible outcomes, and these are, if you do this, we can just say. But what I know is that climate change is going to affect Turkish economy a lot. This is something that I can foresee with Turkish data, definitely. So I don't know if you want to call it a threat or risk. I'm not sure about that.
Thank you very much. I think we can all safely agree that whilst we all live on this planet Earth, we are all exposed to some degree of risk or the other. And the fact that we live in a so-called borderless society, when we talk about globalization, we do have our physical borders, airports, ports, and what have you. But you've seen in the case of COVID that those are kind of transient to some extent. And so as long as we remain connected as a human race, which is a strength in tackling the challenges of climate change and the security issues and development issue and displacement issue that comes with it, it is also important to understand that those can also be the possible challenges to achieving the appropriate outcomes. So as I felt it will probably not be appropriate for me to do a good reflection and wrap up of this panel, and also I've employed the support of my students to kind of wrap up. When they saw the papers for this panel, they feel that it lends well to the overlap between the nexus and the things for us to explore going forward. So if you can just put on the mic and then say what your views are and the times of reflection to wrap this up. Thank you.
So thank you for having us here for a start. I'll try and be quick because of times. I'm Shelby Follows. With my fellow students, we've got Maria Cueva and Nelma Nako, and we're just going to wrap up, give you some food for thought, really. So I'd just like to start by saying, if you're fortunate enough to be in yesterday's inaugural speeches, or even in some of today's actual presentations, I'd like to raise your attention to the lack of geospatial intelligence mentioned. So I believe it's impossible to think of the interactions between climate security, geopolitics, without using geospatial intelligence, because it's an incredible tool for assessing like food security, conflict impact, migration, loads of things. It's also really accessible, like it is open access, and I feel like this accessibility is something that can contribute towards achieving those SDGs. So just to give you like a quick example, so geospatial intelligence can obviously be used for locating areas most at risk from climate change. So we already know that rising sea levels are a massive issue, especially in the Pacific Islands. So I feel like geospatial intelligence is useful for predicting these future changes and seeing these impacts that they can have on the security of these communities there. So for example, Kiribati, we all know that that's one of the first islands that's really at threat from the sea level rise, especially within like the end of the century. It's expected to be over 60% submerged, which is obviously a massive issue for the people living there now. This can ultimately lead to mass migration, which is obviously a security issue for both the host country and those Pacific Islands themselves. So I just want to pose a question to you. So where do these people go? Can we, do we have to prepare for a worst case scenario? Do we have to make evacuations mandatory? Just using geospatial intelligence can kind of help us in answering these questions by analyzing land use, land availability, current food and water security issues, as well as the demographic statistics of potential host countries. So this kind of idea is something that I'm rather interested in and would like to research further within my master's thesis. So I'd just like to briefly explore the idea of AI and current emergence of machine learning as well. This is really useful in agricultural sectors. So monitoring soil and crop conditions and determining the best time to plant crops for areas that are the most food insecure to get the best food yields and productivity. So because of these reasons, I believe that climate security cannot be properly studied or understood without using geospatial intelligence first. And it's especially important within climate security, but can also be used amongst other research areas as well. And I will now hand over to Maria.
So I'm just picking up what Shelby said. I think that countries just preferring to describe climate change as an impact or an effect or challenge rather than just a threat. I know that these words can be synonyms for the word threat, but it's likely that these words have been chosen just to consciously avoid associating climate change with a threat. If we were to claim that the securitization must include all of these three aspects of the grammar and rhetoric of security, with just an existential threat, a point of no return, or a solution to the threat, then none of these countries would have securitized the issue of climate change, and we'll only see it as an impact, effect, problem, and so on. I also believe that another limitation for securitization of climate change is established within the international system itself and does not only exist at a national level. For example, in the United Nations framework of Convention of Climate Change, they tried to be as fair as possible when it comes to burden sharing for climate mitigation measures, and thus has applied the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. This has rather presented consequences for climate negotiations instead of just facilitating negotiation on environmental standards and emission targets. So the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities enables countries such as India and China to claim that they are exempt from the same emission targets as these developed industrialized countries, even though these countries often emit the same or more amounts of greenhouse gases than other developed countries. This is also much related to the global North and South divide, which has also come to define environmental politics and climate mitigation. I also believe that there's no enforcement mechanism as in the international level that obliges states to incorporate what has been agreed on this conference globally on the national level, which limits climate mitigation. And to conclude, my question is, should we securitize climate change, its geopolitical risks, impacts on human security, water, environment, and displacements as revealed throughout these papers presented in the theme? Now we'll hand over to Mel.
Thank you very much. So I have really enjoyed listening to everything that's been said today and yesterday. And one thing that's really come up to me is that this conference is key to our future forwards in this field, because climate change, it's not one issue. It's a big, complex, tangled mess of issues that are all interconnected and they're all interlinked. And we have to, when we're doing research, focus on very narrow, specific things because we need the detail. But we also have to have a holistic and integrated overview in our research because we have to understand the natural side of it, the climatology and the ocean and the atmosphere. But we also need to understand the economy and society and politics and how that side plays into it. And the big thing we need to understand is people, because people are the biggest complication to sorting out climate change. We've drawn loads of lines on the maps, and which side of the line you're on depends on whether or not you get aid and what type of aid you get and how your government responds to things. But the cold snap that hit North America last winter didn't care for the sovereignty of the US border. It didn't care for any of the sovereignty of Mexico's border.
the wildfires that hit Europe this summer and have been hitting the world constantly for the last few years and before that, they cross borders, they don't care. The same with floods. But we care about the borders, and so we have to consider that in our responses. Similarly, there's a lot of apathy and denial and mistrust of science around the world, and that's something we have to counter because we can't implement responses if people don't care, and we can't implement responses if people don't believe what we're saying. So how do we fix that? And it's this conference, it's this style of negotiation, it's having everyone in the room, whether they focus on business or economy or health or the science of the geology and the climate, having all of these people in a room together and starting that conversation. My question, my thing that I put forward to everyone in this room, being either researchers or field practitioners or whatever, is where do we go from here? Where do we take this conversation to turn it into actual solutions? And how do we solve the problem? Because it's all well and good everyone having a conversation and sharing information in a room, but then today finishes. Where do we go from here? What's the next step? Thank you.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of research, really. You have more questions than answers, and then we keep going, which is good. On that note, I'd like to thank all the presenters for this panel, for this theme, Dr. Razmil, Dr. Suruj, and all the people online. I apologize sincerely to the people online. The system has crashed, so I can't type. Anything I type doesn't go in through. There's a question I was looking at trying to take on, but it just won't come up. So apologies if you're online. You can send your questions through by email, and we'll find a way to get those reactions to you or connect you to the authors of the papers. To all the audience here today, also this morning for this first theme, I'd like to thank you for your patience. It will have been quite weird and quite a spectacle if the presenters came here today and started talking to themselves. There would be a thin line between that and insanity. So thank you for sitting here patiently and listening. And to the people online, thank you for spending your valuable time with us. We do appreciate it. And all the questions posed, it just means that there are more opportunities to work together than before. So thank you very much. And now it is officially tea break or coffee break, your fundamental human right. Thank you.
Just on a practical aspect, the coffee break it's up. Then we will have here the theme number 5, responses to climate and emergency and disaster, chaired by Professor Donald. Perhaps, yeah, that's what I wanted to say as a co-organizer. Then I take my head as we will take a little bit longer, like 20 minutes, come back here. Thank you.